Unaware his poor, abandoned black ex is now married to Korean Mafia boss, he kicked her at the mall. The polished leather shoe connected with Nality's ribs before she could even process what was happening. She slammed into the marble floor, Christmas gift boxes exploding around her, her burgundy dress tearing as her palms scraped against cold stone. Blood smeared the pristine white marble. For 3 suspended seconds, the entire Seoul luxury mall went silent. Nality looked up from the floor, hand pressed against her screaming ribs, at the man towering over her with disgust carved into his features. Kelvin. Her ex-boyfriend. The man who'd stolen her savings 3 years ago. The man who'd left her sleeping in her car with $17 and a dying phone. Still following me around? Kelvin sneered, his new girlfriend clinging to his arm in head-to-toe designer labels. Women like you don't end up in places like this by accident. He had no idea who she was anymore. No idea that the desperate woman he remembered, the one who'd begged him to stay, who'd sold her jewelry just to eat, who'd cried herself to sleep in that car, was gone. No idea that she'd been reborn from those ashes. No idea about the platinum wedding band hidden beneath her glove, the penthouse in Seoul she'd woken up in that morning, or the black card in her purse with no spending limit. And Kelvin definitely had no idea about the man whose name was now legally attached to hers. The man whose security team had already moved into position around her. The man whose phone was vibrating in her purse right now. Seo-jun. Her husband. Seoul's most dangerous underground king. As Nality's trembling fingers answered the call and Seo-jun's deadly calm voice asked, "Are you hurt?" she watched confusion start to creep across Kelvin's smug face. He just kicked the wrong woman. And in approximately 7 minutes, when Seo-jun's motorcade pulled into this mall's underground garage, Kelvin was going to learn a lesson about consequences that would shatter his entire world. But he didn't know it yet. Right now, in this frozen moment, he still thought she was nothing. That was about to change. Before we dive deeper into this story of survival, power, and justice, I want to thank you for watching. Now, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Your support means everything to me. Now, let's get into this incredible journey. Nality had stood in their penthouse bedroom that morning, choosing a simple burgundy dress from the walk-in closet. Despite the luxury surrounding her, designer labels hanging like an expensive army, she still gravitated toward understated elegance. Old survival instincts from harder times. "You're doing it again," Seo-jun said from the doorway, already dressed in a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was devastatingly handsome, his dark hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding even in their private sanctuary. "Doing what?" She turned, fastening a delicate gold necklace. "Choosing the simplest things in your closet." He crossed to her, sliding his hands around her waist. "You're married to one of the most powerful men in Seoul. Stop dressing like you're still counting pennies." She laughed softly. "I like simple things. I like spoiling you." He kissed her temple, his voice dropping. "Humor me. You humor me by loving me exactly as I am." His expression softened in that way it only did for her. "Always." Then, more seriously, "Where are you going today?" "Just the luxury mall. Some Christmas shopping." "I won't be long." Something flickered in his eyes. Seo-jun was protective to the point of obsession, a fact she both loved and occasionally found overwhelming. "Take Jihyun and Sunghyun with you." "Baby, I don't need bodyguards for shopping." His jaw tightened. "Nality. You know what I am. What I do. You know the enemies that creates. You don't leave without security. Non-negotiable." The steel in his voice was absolute. This was Seo-jun, the underground king, speaking. Not just her husband. She cupped his face gently. "Okay. I'll take them." The tension left his shoulders immediately. "Thank you." He checked his watch, solid platinum, minimalist, obscenely expensive. "I have a meeting across town. I'll be home by 6. We have dinner reservations at 7:30. "Where?" That dangerous smile. It's a surprise. We're something beautiful. Everything you buy me is beautiful. Then we're something that will make me want to cancel our reservation and keep you home instead. Heat flooded her cheeks even as she smiled. You're impossible. Only with you. One more kiss, deep, thorough, leaving her breathless, before he left. 2 hours later, Naledi walked through the Seoul luxury mall with Ji-hun and Sung-hyun maintaining a discreet distance. The mall was a cathedral of wealth. Marble floors reflecting crystal chandeliers. Every boutique a shrine to excess. Christmas decorations sparkled everywhere, gold, silver, crimson, elegant and expensive. She just exited a jewelry store, shopping bags in hand, when she saw him. Kelvin. Her ex-boyfriend. The man who'd left her homeless and broken. The man who'd stolen her savings and vanished. The man she'd loved who'd called her worthless before walking away forever. He was standing near a Louis Vuitton display, laughing with a woman drowning in designer labels. He looked exactly the same. Same arrogant smile. Same expensive taste funded by other people's money. Same entitled swagger. Naledi's hands trembled. The bags nearly slipped from her grip. 3 years. She'd thought she was over this. She was wrong. But to understand how Naledi went from sleeping in her car to standing in Seoul's most expensive mall as a mafia boss's wife, we need to go back. Back to the night Kelvin destroyed her life. 3 years ago, Naledi had believed in fairy tales. She'd met Kelvin at a charity gala in Johannesburg. She was waitressing, he was networking. He'd smiled at her like she was the only person in the room, asked her name 3 times just to hear her say it, and left a business card with his number and a single word written on the back, please. Within 2 months, she'd moved into his apartment. Within 6, she'd stopped recognizing herself. It started small. Kelvin suggesting she quit her job. I make enough for both of us, baby. Then managing her finances. Let me handle the bills. You're terrible with money. Then slowly, methodically, draining her savings account for investments that never materialized. By the time Naledi realized what was happening, she had nothing left. No savings. No job. No safety net. Just Kelvin's promises that everything would be okay. The night he left, Naledi came home to an empty apartment. No furniture. No clothes. No note. Just 4 bare walls and the echo of her own breathing. She'd called him 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. Finally, at 2 a.m., a single text arrived. This isn't working. You're holding me back. Don't contact me again. Naledi remembered sliding down the wall, phone clutched in her shaking hands, trying to comprehend how a man who'd whispered, forever, 3 nights ago could vanish like smoke. He'd taken everything. Her savings, $8,000 she'd spent years accumulating. Her grandmother's jewelry, sold without permission. Even her laptop, claiming he needed it for work. She had $143 in her checking account and rent due in 5 days. The eviction notice came exactly when he knew it would. What followed were the darkest 60 days of Naledi's life. Living in her car, a 2009 Honda Civic with a broken heater, parked behind a 24-hour laundromat because at least the fluorescent lights felt safer than darkness. Rationing single-serve ramen packets. Showering at a truck stop for $3 a day until even that became too expensive. The hunger was constant, gnawing. But worse was the shame. The way people looked through her. The way old friends stopped returning calls when they realized she couldn't afford coffee dates anymore. The way she started believing Kelvin's final words, "You're holding me back." Maybe she was worthless. Maybe she deserved this. Surviving, she learned, was not the same as living. Survival was mechanical. Wake up. Find food. Stay warm. Repeat. Living required hope, and Naledi's hope had died in an empty apartment. Now, Standing in this Seoul luxury mall with blood on her hand and Kelvin's contempt ringing in her ears, those 60 days came rushing back with visceral clarity. The metallic taste of fear. The weight of invisibility. The bone-deep cold that no amount of blankets could touch. But something was different this time. This time, when her phone vibrated, she wasn't alone. Naladi's trembling fingers pulled out her phone. Seo Jun's name illuminated the screen. She answered before the second ring. Are you hurt? His voice was calm, controlled, but she heard the undercurrent. The barely leashed violence. Yes, she whispered, her free hand pressed against her throbbing ribs. But I'm okay. Silence. Then, who touched you? Her eyes found Kelvin across the frozen mall, his expression shifting from smug satisfaction to creeping confusion as Jihan and Sunghyun moved into defensive positions around her. My ex, Naladi said softly. Kelvin. Another pause, longer, heavier, lethal. I'm on my way, Seo Jun said, each word precise as a blade. Do not leave that mall. Do you understand me? Yes. I'll be there in 7 minutes. The call ended. Naladi lowered the phone slowly, her heart hammering against her broken ribs. She looked at Kelvin, at the man who'd left her to starve, who'd stolen her dignity, who still thought she was nothing. He had no idea what was coming. And for the first time in 3 years, Naladi didn't feel small. She felt dangerous. Kelvin stared at Naladi like she'd lost her mind. Who the hell are you calling? He demanded, taking a step forward. Some fake boyfriend? Let me guess, you paid actors to pretend you matter? Naladi didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because Jihan and Sunghyun had already moved. 1 second they were invisible in the crowd. The next, they flanked Naladi like steel walls, 2 men in perfectly tailored dark suits, their posture military precise, their eyes scanning the mall with professional detachment. Jihan spoke first, his voice calm but absolute. Sir, you need to step back. Kelvin laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed under the crystal chandeliers. Are you serious right now? She hired bodyguards? He looked at his girlfriend, shaking his head in disbelief. This is pathetic. Even for her. The woman on his arm shifted uncomfortably, her designer heels clicking against marble as she took a half step back. Sir, Sunghyun said, his tone dropping several degrees. Final warning. Step back. Kelvin's face flushed with anger. You don't tell me what to. He shoved Jihan. That was his last mistake as a free man. What happened next occurred in less than 3 seconds, but Naladi watched it unfold in slow motion. Sunghyun moved with brutal efficiency, one hand capturing Kelvin's wrist, twisting it behind his back, the other pressing between his shoulder blades. Kelvin's face slammed against the marble floor with a sickening crack. Get off me. Kelvin shouted, struggling. I'll sue. You'll be quiet, Jihan said softly, kneeling beside him with one knee pressed against his spine. The mall erupted. Shoppers gasped. Phones lifted, recording everything. Kelvin's girlfriend stumbled backward, her shopping bag scattering across the floor. Somewhere, a child started crying. Mall security rushed toward them, 3 guards in standard uniforms, radios crackling. What's going on here? The lead guard demanded, breathless. We got a call about an assault. He stopped mid-sentence. Because he'd seen Jihan's face. Recognized something. The blood drained from the guard's expression. We have this under control, Jihan said quietly. The security guard's hand went to his radio. Then stopped. His eyes darted between Jihan, Sunghyun, and Naladi with something that looked like fear. Is there anything you need? The guard asked carefully. No, Sunghyun replied. But thank you. The security team retreated without another word. Kelvin's eyes widened, panic replacing arrogance. What the hell? Who are you people? Naladi pressed her hand against her ribs, feeling the ache spread through her torso. She should feel triumphant. Vindicated. But all she felt was tired, bone-deep exhaustion from carrying 3 years of shame. Naledi? Jihan's voice softened. Are you all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The crowd had formed a wide circle now, everyone filming, whispering. The energy in the mall had shifted from holiday cheer to something electric and dangerous. People sensed what Kelvin couldn't, that invisible lines of power had just been drawn, and he'd crossed every single one. Then the whispers started. Someone near the back, is that? Another voice, it can't be. Look at the security detail. Oh my God. Naledi felt it before she heard it, the change in atmospheric pressure, like a storm front moving in. The sound of synchronized footsteps. The crowd at the mall's south entrance parted instinctively, people stumbling over themselves to move aside. Naledi turned, her breath catching. 6 men in black suits advanced through the corridor of shoppers with military precision, moving in perfect formation. And at their center, walking with unhurried confidence, his dark coat open, his expression carved from stone. Seo-jun. Her husband had arrived. The mall went silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't shock. This was recognition. This was fear dressed in holiday decorations and expensive perfume. This was power, walking through a luxury mall like he owned it. Because in every way that mattered, he did. Kelvin, still pinned to the floor, twisted his head to look. His face went pale. No, he whispered. No, that can't be. Seo-jun's eyes found Naledi across the marble expanse. Everything else disappeared. Seo-jun crossed the mall floor like he was walking through his own home, unhurried, controlled, absolute. His security detail maintained formation, but every eye in the building was on him. He stopped 3 feet from Naledi. For a moment, he just looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something raw beneath the stone. Then his hands were on her face, gentle as prayer, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Let me see, he murmured, his voice meant only for her. It's not bad, Naledi said quickly, her voice cracking. Just bruises. I'm okay. Seo-jun's gaze dropped to her ribs, where she still pressed her hand. Then to the blood smeared across her palm. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You're bleeding. It's just a scrape. You're bleeding, he repeated, softer this time, like he was trying to convince himself not to burn the entire mall to the ground. His hands moved to her arms, steadying her. Can you stand straight? She tried. Pain lanced through her side, stealing her breath. Seo-jun's expression went very, very quiet. That was more terrifying than any rage. He turned slowly, his coat shifting with the movement, and looked at Kelvin, still pinned beneath Sung-hyun's knee, his face pressed against cold marble. You're married? Kelvin blurted, his voice pitching high with panic. To him? This is your husband? Seo-jun said nothing. He simply looked at Kelvin the way someone might observe an insect. That's impossible, Kelvin continued, words tumbling out. You were nothing. You were broke. You slept in your car. How did you, when did you? Yes, Seo-jun said quietly, cutting through Kelvin's spiral. She is my wife. The words carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. Final. Undeniable. Fact. The mall had gone so silent that Naledi could hear her own heartbeat. Seo-jun gestured almost lazily. Let him up. Sung-hyun released Kelvin immediately, stepping back with military precision. Kelvin scrambled to his feet, backing away, his expensive suit rumpled and dusty. I didn't know, Kelvin said, hands raised. I swear, I didn't know who she was. Stop. One word. Kelvin's mouth snapped shut. Seo-jun moved closer, not aggressively, just closing the distance, and Kelvin retreated until his back hit a marble pillar. You didn't know, Seo Jun repeated, tilting his head slightly. Interesting defense. He glanced at Naledi, then back to Kelvin. So you assault women you think are nobody. Women without protection. Women you believe have no value. Kelvin's face went red. That's not, I didn't mean. That makes it worse. Seo Jun's voice remained perfectly calm. Conversational, even. You see, if you'd attacked my wife knowing who she was, that would be stupid. Suicidal, but at least strategic. He took another step forward. Kelvin tried to shrink into the pillar. But you kicked her because you thought she was powerless. Because you believed no one would stop you. Seo Jun smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Naledi had ever seen. That tells me everything about who you are. Behind them, a man in an expensive suit approached quickly. Mall management, Naledi realized, his badge gleaming. He stopped beside Ji-hun, speaking in urgent whispers. Ji-hun murmured something back. The manager's face went pale. He nodded rapidly, then retreated without approaching Seo Jun directly. I'm sorry, Kelvin tried again, his voice breaking. Please, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Yes, Seo Jun agreed. It was. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt. Not submissively. But slowly, deliberately, bringing himself to Kelvin's eye level where he'd collapsed against the pillar. Close enough that only the cameras would catch his next words. You stole from her, Seo Jun said softly. You left her homeless. And today, you put your foot on her body in front of hundreds of witnesses. Kelvin shook his head frantically. I didn't know. I don't care. Seo Jun's voice never rose above a whisper. She deserved protection then, and you gave her nothing. She has it now. And you're going to learn the difference. He stood in one fluid motion, adjusting his coat. I'm not going to touch you, Seo Jun said, loud enough for the crowd to hear now. I don't need to. He turned his back on Kelvin, the ultimate dismissal, and walked to Naledi, his expression softening the moment their eyes met. We're leaving, he said gently, offering his arm. Naledi took it, leaning into his strength. As they walked toward the exit, Seo Jun's security detail falling into formation around them, Kelvin's phone began to ring. Then his girlfriend's phone. Then another phone nearby. All across the mall, devices started buzzing, chiming, vibrating. News traveled fast in Seoul. And Seo Jun hadn't needed to lift a finger for it to spread. Kelvin remained slumped against the pillar, watching them leave, his phone still ringing in his pocket. He didn't answer it. Somewhere deep in his arrogant, entitled brain, he was beginning to understand that his world had just ended. Not with violence. With consequence. By the time Naledi and Seo Jun reached the penthouse, Kelvin's phone had rung 43 times. He didn't know that yet. He was still in the mall, surrounded by cameras, trying to explain to security why he'd assaulted a woman in front of Christmas shoppers. But the calls were coming. And they wouldn't stop. Naledi sat on the edge of their bed while Seo Jun's private physician examined her ribs. Dr. Choi was efficient and gentle, her hands professional as she pressed carefully against Naledi's side. Bruised, not broken, Dr. Choi confirmed. You'll be sore for a week, maybe 2. Ice and rest. Thank you, Naledi whispered. Seo Jun stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the Seoul skyline. He hadn't said much since they'd left the mall. Just held her hand in the car, his thumb tracing circles against her palm. After Dr. Choi left, Naledi expected him to say something. To ask if she was okay. To promise revenge. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a single call. It's done, he asked quietly. A pause as he listened. Good. Keep me updated. He hung up. That was all. Naledi pulled a blanket around her shoulders. What's done? Seo Jun turned to her, his expression unreadable. Justice, he said simply. Then, softer, are you hungry? I can have something sent up. She wasn't. But she nodded anyway, because she recognized the look in his eyes. He needed to take care of her. To fix something when he couldn't undo what Kelvin had done. The first call Kelvin answered was from his employer. "We need you to come in tomorrow morning," his manager said, voice tight. "There's been a situation." "What situation?" Kelvin demanded, still standing in the mall parking garage, his girlfriend long gone. "We've received some concerning documentation. Financial irregularities in your expense reports. We'll discuss it tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't be late." The line went dead. Kelvin stared at his phone. Financial irregularities? That was impossible. He'd been careful. Hadn't he? The second call came from his bank. "Mr. Wellington, this is fraud prevention. We've flagged several suspicious transactions on your account and need to verify." "There's no fraud," Kelvin snapped. "Those are my transactions." "Sir, we have documentation suggesting otherwise. Forged signatures, unauthorized transfers." "From when?" "Going back 3 years. Naledi's money. The savings he'd taken. The jewelry he'd sold." "How did they?" The third call was from his fiancé's father. "You need to stay away from my daughter." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Whatever you did today, it's trending everywhere. My daughter doesn't need that kind of attention. Lose her number. We're engaged." "Not anymore." Click. Naledi scrolled through her phone, curled against Seojun on the living room couch. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Hashtag Seoul Luxury Mall assault was trending. Videos from every angle, Kelvin kicking her, shoving Ji-hun, being restrained. The footage was crystal clear. Damning. But it wasn't just the assault. Someone had leaked documents. Financial records. Bank statements. Email threads showing how Kelvin had systematically drained her account 3 years ago. Screenshots of texts where he'd promised to pay her back, then blocked her number. "How?" she whispered. Seojun pressed a kiss to her temple. "Does it matter?" "Did you?" "I made one phone call," he said quietly. "I asked someone to look into his background. That's all." "Everything else?" He gestured to her phone. "That's him. His choices. His crimes. I just turned on the light." Naledi scrolled further. A statement from Kelvin's former employer, suspended pending investigation into financial misconduct. His fiancée had posted on Instagram, "I do not condone abusive behavior of any kind." Former colleagues were commenting. Old friends sharing their own stories about money Kelvin owed, promises he'd broken. The internet was doing what the internet did best, digging, exposing, destroying. "He's finished," Naledi said, the words hollow. "He finished himself years ago," Seojun corrected. Today was just the bill coming due. By midnight, Kelvin was trending for different reasons. Not as a victim. As a cautionary tale. Someone had compiled a thread, "Man assaults ex he left homeless, didn't know she married this guy." Photos of Seojun from business articles, carefully curated to show power without revealing too much. The comments were merciless. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Imagine thinking you could kick someone and get away with it in 2024. She upgraded. He downgraded. Karma is beautiful." Kelvin tried to post a statement. His account had been suspended for harassment. He tried to call his lawyer. Voicemail. He tried to go home. His apartment building security informed him his access had been revoked pending investigation by building management. Nowhere felt safe. Because Seojun hadn't destroyed Kelvin. Kelvin had destroyed himself. Seojun had simply made sure everyone was watching when the foundation finally cracked. That night, Naledi stood on the penthouse balcony, soul glowing beneath her like scattered diamonds. Seojun wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Today?" She thought about the woman she used to be. The one who believed survival was the same as living. No, she said finally. I feel free. Seo-jun nodded. Good. Because I didn't do this for revenge. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I did it so the world would never mistake your silence for weakness again. Naledi believed him. Naledi woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and Seo-jun's arm draped protectively across her waist. For a moment, she just breathed. Her ribs ached. Her palm was bandaged. But something else, something she'd carried for 3 years, felt lighter. Seo-jun stirred beside her. How do you feel? Sore, she admitted. Then, more honestly, strange. He propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face. Strange how? Naledi struggled to find the words. I thought I'd feel guilty. About what happened to Kelvin. About watching his life fall apart. She looked at Seo-jun, but I don't. Is that wrong? No, he said simply. How can you be sure? Seo-jun was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. When I met you, he said finally, you apologized for everything. For taking up space. For breathing too loud. For existing. Naledi's throat tightened. She remembered those early days, before Seoul, before marriage, when she'd been barely holding herself together. You'd been trained to believe you deserved nothing, Seo-jun continued. That wanting safety, wanting justice, wanting more was selfish. His eyes met hers. So no, Naledi. Feeling free isn't wrong. It's overdue. They ate breakfast on the balcony, kimchi jjigae that Seo-jun had made himself, strong coffee, fresh fruit. Normal things. Domestic things. But Naledi couldn't stop checking her phone. More articles. More threads. Kelvin's former employer had terminated him. His fiancée had moved out of their shared apartment. 3 other women had come forward with similar stories: money borrowed and never returned, emotional manipulation, sudden disappearances. You're not responsible for his choices, Seo-jun said, watching her scroll. I know. Naledi set the phone down. But I keep thinking, what if I'd been stronger 3 years ago? What if I'd fought back? You survived, Seo-jun said firmly. That was fighting back. It didn't feel like it. It felt like drowning. He reached across the table, taking her hand. You know what I see when I look at you? Naledi shook her head. Someone who slept in her car for 60 days and didn't give up. Someone who rebuilt herself from nothing. Someone who walked into that mall yesterday without fear. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. That's not weakness, Naledi. That's steel. Tears burned behind her eyes. Then why do I still feel broken sometimes? Because healing isn't linear, Seo-jun said quietly. And because the world told you that surviving wasn't enough. That you had to be fine immediately, or you were failing. He squeezed her hand. But you're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. That afternoon, Naledi sat in Seo-jun's study while he worked, her laptop open on the opposite desk. She'd been staring at a blank document for 20 minutes. What are you thinking about? Seo-jun asked without looking up from his papers. The women who came forward, Naledi said slowly. About Kelvin. They all said the same thing, they thought they were alone. That no one would believe them. Seo-jun set down his pen. And? I was thinking, she hesitated. What if there was somewhere they could go? Not just for legal help. But for everything. Housing. Job training. Therapy. A place that believed them. Seo-jun leaned back in his chair, watching her with quiet intensity. You want to build something. I want to help women who were me, Naledi said, the words coming faster now. Women who've been drained, abandoned, told they're worthless. Women who are surviving but not living. That's a big undertaking. I know. She closed the laptop. Maybe it's stupid. It's not stupid. Seo-jun stood, crossing to her desk. It's exactly who you are. Naledi looked up at him. You think I can do this? I think you already are, he said. You've been doing it since the day you refused to let him destroy you completely. That evening, Naledi stood at the window, watching Seoul's lights flicker to life like fallen stars. Seo-jun appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist carefully, mindful of her ribs. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, she murmured. About me apologizing for existing. And? I don't want to do that anymore. She turned in his arms. I don't want to shrink. I don't want to hide. I spent 3 years believing I deserved what happened to me. That Kelvin leaving was proof I wasn't enough. You were always enough, Seo-jun said fiercely. I know that now. Naledi touched his face. Because you showed me. Not by destroying him. But by protecting me. By seeing me when I was invisible. Seo-jun kissed her forehead. You were never invisible to me. I want other women to feel that too, Naledi said. I want them to know they're not alone. That surviving is enough. That they deserve more than just not dying. Then we'll build it, Seo-jun said simply. Whatever you need. Just like that? Just like that. Naledi laughed softly, the sound lighter than it had been in years. You know, 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought Kelvin breaking me was the end of my story. And now? She looked out at Seoul, at the city that had given her everything Kelvin had tried to take. Now I think it was just the beginning. The building in Itaewon wasn't much to look at from the outside, 3 stories of worn brick wedged between a cafe and a vintage clothing shop. But Naledi saw something else when she stood on the sidewalk, keys in hand. She saw possibility. Are you sure about this location? Seo-jun asked, standing beside her. I can find you something in Seocho. More prestigious. I don't want prestigious, Naledi said. I want accessible. Women in crisis don't need marble floors. They need somewhere that feels safe. Seo-jun smiled. Then this is perfect. The renovation took 3 weeks. Naledi worked alongside the contractors, choosing warm colors instead of sterile whites, comfortable furniture instead of expensive showpieces. She wanted the space to feel like a home, not an institution. One afternoon, standing in what would become the main consultation room, she found herself frozen. The last time she'd built something, Kelvin had destroyed it. Drained her savings. Stolen her security. Left her with nothing. What if she failed again? You won't. Naledi turned. Seo-jun stood in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in his hands. How did you? I know that look, he said, handing her a cup. You're wondering if you deserve this. If it's going to be taken away. She didn't deny it. Seo-jun set his coffee down and took both her hands. 3 years ago, you survived 60 days in your car with $17. You're opening a support center with unlimited funding and an entire security team. Those are not the same woman. Then why do I still feel like her sometimes? Because she's part of you, Seo-jun said gently. She always will be. But she doesn't define you anymore. You define her. The financial settlement came through on a Tuesday. Naledi sat in a lawyer's office, Seo-jun's lawyer, who'd worked pro bono, staring at a check. $8,000. The exact amount Kelvin had stolen. Plus interest. Plus damages. Plus legal fees. He fought it at first, the lawyer explained. But once the evidence went public, his legal team advised settlement. Consider it closed. Naledi held the check carefully, like it might disintegrate. This money had represented her entire world once. Her safety net. Her future. Kelvin had taken it without hesitation, without remorse. Now it was back. But she didn't need it anymore. That night, Naledi endorsed the check and deposited it directly into the support center's operating fund. Seo Jun found her standing in the center's empty lobby afterward, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong." She laughed, wiping her eyes. "For the first time in 3 years, nothing's wrong. That money, it used to be my entire life. And now?" She looked around the space. "Now it's a beginning for someone else." Seo Jun pulled her close. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For turning your pain into purpose." The Haven, that's what Naledi named it, opened on a cold Monday in January. No grand ceremony. No media coverage. Just a simple sign on the door: "You are safe here. You are believed. You are not alone." The first woman who walked through the door was 23, with a black eye and everything she owned in a grocery bag. Naledi recognized herself immediately. "I don't have money," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I can't pay." "You don't need to," Naledi said gently, leading her inside. "Everything here is free. Food, housing referrals, legal aid, counseling. Whatever you need." The woman stared at her. "Why?" Naledi thought of a parking lot 3 years ago. A car with a broken heater. The hollow ache of believing no one cared if she lived or died. "Because someone should have been here for me," she said. "And they weren't. So now I'm here for you." 6 weeks after opening, Naledi had helped 17 women. Some needed temporary housing. Others needed legal protection. One needed help filing bankruptcy after her ex destroyed her credit. Naledi sat with each of them. Listened to their stories. Saw herself reflected in every desperate eye, every apologetic voice, every woman who'd been taught to believe she deserved nothing. And with each woman who walked out stronger than she'd walked in, Naledi felt something shift inside herself. She wasn't that woman in the parking lot anymore. She was the woman others could turn to. 3 months after the Haven opened, a photographer came. Not for publicity. For documentation. Seo Jun had commissioned a series of photographs for the center's walls, images of strength, resilience, survival. "Just stand there," the photographer said, gesturing to the space in front of the Haven's sign. Naledi stood. Shoulders back. Chin up. Hands relaxed at her sides. The camera clicked. Later, Seo Jun showed her the photograph. Naledi stared at the image, at the woman looking directly into the lens with quiet confidence, no apology in her posture, no fear in her eyes. "That's not me," she whispered. "It is," Seo Jun said. "That's who you've always been. You just couldn't see it yet." Naledi studied the photograph again. The woman in the image stood in front of a building she'd created, wearing a dress she'd chosen, living a life she'd built from ashes. No one had rescued her. She'd rescued herself. And now she was rescuing others. "Can I hang this in my office?" she asked. "It's yours," Seo Jun said. "Everything is yours now. Your life. Your choices. Your future." Naledi looked at him, at the man who'd protected her without controlling her, who'd supported her without diminishing her, who'd helped her build something that would outlast any revenge. "Thank you," she said. "For seeing me." "Thank you," he replied, "for letting me." The photograph hung behind Naledi's desk, framed in simple black wood. Not a reminder of what she'd survived, but proof of what she'd become. A woman standing. Unbroken. Untouchable. Free. Kelvin's email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Naledi was reviewing intake forms at the Haven when her phone buzzed. She almost deleted it without reading. Wellington, Kelvin in the center field made her stomach clench instinctively. But something made her open it. Subject: I need to explain. Naledi. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your time. But I need you to understand that I never meant for things to go the way they did. I was young. Stupid. I made mistakes. But what happened at the mall, that wasn't who I am. I was having a bad day, and I didn't recognize you, and everything just spiraled. I've lost everything. My job. My relationship. My reputation. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just need you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving you. For taking your money. For that day in the mall. I know your husband is powerful. I know he could destroy what's left of my life with a phone call. I'm not asking you to stop him. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. And I hope you're happy now. You deserve it. K. Naledi read it 3 times. Each time, she expected to feel something. Anger. Vindication. Pity. Something. Instead, she felt nothing. The words were empty. Performative. An apology constructed not from remorse but from consequence. I didn't recognize you. As if that made it acceptable. I was having a bad day. As if his mood justified violence. I'm not asking for sympathy. While asking for exactly that. She set her phone down. Everything okay? Ji-hun asked from his position near the door. He'd been assigned to the Haven permanently, Seo-jun's compromise when Naledi insisted she didn't need security for office work. Fine, Naledi said. Just someone from the past trying to rewrite history. That evening, Naledi showed Seo-jun the email. He read it once, his expression unreadable. Then he handed her phone back. Do you want me to respond? He asked carefully. No, Naledi said. I want you to tell me the truth. How bad is it for him? Seo-jun was quiet for a moment. He's unemployed. Blacklisted in his industry. His assets were frozen during the investigation. Most have been liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. He's living with his mother in Johannesburg. And his mother knows? Everything. Naledi tried to imagine it. Kelvin, who'd always cared so much about appearances, explaining to his mother why he'd been fired, why his fiancée left, why videos of him assaulting a woman were trending online. He thinks this is about the mall, she said slowly. Seo-jun tilted his head. Isn't it? No. Naledi stood, moving to the window. The mall was just when he realized he'd lost. But he lost years ago. The moment he walked away from me. How do you figure? She turned to face him. Because he walked away thinking he'd won. That he'd taken everything that mattered and left me with nothing. But the truth? She smiled faintly. He never had anything real to begin with. Just money he'd stolen and a woman he'd manipulated. The second I stopped playing his game, he had nothing. Seo-jun crossed to her, sliding his arms around her waist. And what do you have? Naledi looked around their penthouse, at the life they'd built together, at the city glowing beyond the windows, at the man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Everything, she said simply. Kelvin sent 3 more emails over the next 2 weeks. Each one more desperate than the last. Please respond. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need closure. Your husband is ruining my life. Please make him stop. Naledi read each one. Never replied. On the 15th day, she blocked his email address. A month later, Naledi received a different message. Not from Kelvin. From one of the women who'd come forward with her own story about him, Sarah, a graphic designer from Cape Town. Hi Naledi. I wanted you to know that because of your bravery, I was able to get justice. Kelvin stole £4,000 from me 2 years ago. I thought I'd never see it again. But after everything came out, I was able to file a claim and I just received restitution. More than that, I stopped blaming myself. For years, I thought I was stupid for trusting him. But seeing your story, seeing other women's stories, I realized it wasn't my fault. He was a predator. We were victims. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for creating the haven. You saved more than just yourself. Sarah. Naledi showed the message to Seo-jun that night. This, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This is what matters. Not what happened to Kelvin. But what happened because of him. Seo-jun kissed her temple. You turned your worst experience into someone else's salvation. We did, Naledi corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. You would have found a way, Seo-jun said. You always do. That night, Naledi sat at her laptop and opened her email archives. Every message from Kelvin, dating back 4 years, sat in a folder labeled K. Love letters from when they'd first met. Promises he'd made. Apologies he'd never meant. And finally, the recent desperate pleas for mercy he didn't deserve. She selected all of them. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Part of her wanted to keep them. Evidence. Proof of what she'd survived. But she didn't need proof anymore. She knew who she was. What she'd overcome. Where she was going. Kelvin was a chapter in her story. Not the author. She pressed delete. The screen went blank. All items moved to trash. Empty trash? Yes. The messages disappeared. Naledi closed her laptop and stood, walking to the window where Seo-jun waited, his arms open. It's done, she said. How do you feel? She thought about it. Really thought about it. Light, she said finally. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I just set it down. Good, Seo-jun murmured against her hair. Because you deserve to be free. Completely. Naledi looked out at Seoul, at the city that had given her everything Kelvin tried to take. She was free. Not because Kelvin had been destroyed. But because she'd finally stopped letting him define her. 6 months after opening, the haven moved to a larger building. 2 floors instead of 1. A full-time staff of 7. Partnerships with legal clinics, therapists, and job placement services. A waiting list. Naledi stood in the new space on opening day, watching women filter through the doors, some with children, some with nothing but the clothes they wore, all with that same look she remembered from her own reflection 3 years ago. Lost. Afraid. Ashamed. But walking through the door anyway. We're at capacity, her assistant manager, Min-ji, said, clipboard in hand. And we have 12 more intake requests for next week. Then we'll find a way, Naledi said. We don't turn anyone away. Min-ji smiled. That's what I told them you'd say. Seo-jun arrived at noon with lunch, kimbap from Naledi's favorite place, still warm. They ate in her office, the framed photograph behind her desk catching afternoon light. The woman in the image stood strong, unbroken, free. You're doing it again, Seo-jun said, watching her check her phone between bites. Doing what? Working through lunch. Forgetting to eat. Trying to save everyone at once. Naledi set her phone down guiltily. There's a woman downstairs. Her ex emptied their joint account and disappeared. She has 2 kids and nowhere to go. And you'll help her, Seo-jun said. After you eat. You can't pour from an empty cup. She smiled despite herself. When did you become so wise? I married a woman who taught me that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites. He reached across the desk, taking her hand. You taught me that. That afternoon, Naledi sat with the woman Seo-jun had mentioned, Hannah, 34, eyes red from crying. I should have seen it coming, Hannah said, twisting a tissue in her hands. All the signs were there. But I kept making excuses. Kept believing he'd change. Naledi knew that script. She'd recited those same lines to herself years ago. It's not your fault, she said gently. Predators are good at what they do. They make you believe you're the problem. But I'm so stupid. No. Nality's voice was firm. You're not stupid. You're human. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to love. Hannah looked up, tears streaming. How did you do it? How did you survive? Nality thought about that question. She'd been asked it dozens of times in the past 6 months. Each time, her answer evolved. I stopped apologizing for existing, she said finally. I stopped believing that what happened to me was a reflection of my worth. And I found people who saw my value when I couldn't see it myself. Did it get easier? Some days, Nality said honestly. Other days, I still wake up and feel like that woman in the parking lot. But the difference now is that I know she was strong too. She just didn't realize it yet. That evening, Nality did something she hadn't done in 6 months. She went back to the mall. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to prove to herself that she could. Seo-jun walked beside her, Ji-hun and Sung-hyun maintaining their usual distance. The Christmas decorations had been replaced with spring florals, but the marble floors still gleamed the same way. Nality stopped at the spot where it had happened. No blood stains remained. No evidence of violence. Just polished stone reflecting designer storefronts. Are you okay? Seo-jun asked quietly. Yes, Nality said. And she meant it. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of this place. Not of the memory. Not of running into people from her past. Because she wasn't that woman anymore. She was the woman who'd survived. Who'd rebuilt. Who'd transformed her pain into purpose. She was untouchable. Not because Seo-jun protected her, though he did. But because she'd learned to protect herself. A month later, the Haven hosted its first fundraiser. 100 guests. Donors, volunteers, survivors who'd graduated from the program and wanted to give back. Nality stood at the podium, looking out at faces illuminated by candlelight. 3 years ago, she began, a man kicked me in a mall because he thought I was nothing. Because he'd trained me to believe I was nothing. Because I'd survived homelessness and poverty and shame, and he assumed that meant I'd been defeated. The room was silent. He was wrong, Nality continued. Survival isn't defeat. It's the first act of resistance. Every day you wake up and choose to keep going, that's power. Every time you ask for help, that's courage. Every moment you refuse to believe you deserved what happened to you, that's revolution. She saw women nodding. Some wiping tears. The Haven exists because I needed it once and it didn't exist. Because too many women are told to be silent, to be small, to be grateful for whatever crumbs they're given. Nality's voice grew stronger. We're here to tell them something different. You deserve safety. You deserve justice. You deserve a life where surviving isn't your greatest accomplishment, it's just your starting point. The applause was thunderous. Later, on the penthouse balcony, Seoul glowing beneath them, Seo-jun wrapped a blanket around Nality's shoulders. Proud of you, he murmured. For what? For turning the worst thing that ever happened to you into the best thing that happened to hundreds of other women. Nality leaned into him. I couldn't have done it alone. You would have found a way, Seo-jun said. You always do. She thought about that. About the woman she'd been, desperate, afraid, apologizing for breathing. And the woman she'd become, strong, purposeful, unafraid. The transformation hadn't happened because Kelvin kicked her. It happened because she stood back up. Weeks later, Nality received a letter. Not from Kelvin. From Sarah, the woman whose restitution claim had succeeded. Inside was a photograph. Sarah standing in front of her new apartment, keys in hand, smiling. On the back, one sentence. You showed me that surviving could become thriving. Thank you. Nality pinned the photograph to her office wall, next to dozens of others. Women who'd walked through the Haven's doors broken and left whole. Women who'd learned what Nality had learned. That silence could become voice. That survival could become power. That being underestimated could become your greatest weapon. Kelvin had kicked her because he thought she was nothing. He never realized he'd struck someone who would rise from that marble floor and build an empire of second chances. Naledi was no longer the woman who apologized for existing. She was the woman others turned to when they needed saving. She was untouchable. And this, all of this, was only the beginning. If this story of resilience, justice, and redemption touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like Naledi's to life. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another journey of transformation and triumph.